I'm sorry, you want me to un-what the what? Oh. Kids, you ain't played nothing like this before. I need to express what a privilege it is to see something so incredibly novel in this hobby. Gaming is no longer the Wild West it once was. The trails have been blazed, the streets have been named, the chupacabras are gainfully employed. It's no longer easy to roam these lands and find wilds untamed. Or rather, it's not easy to find them and make them any good. No longer fording rivers, we're now into building bridges. But every now and then, some developer finds a cave unexplored, some dirt untilled, or a really cool rock. That brings us games like Outer Wilds, often referenced with, "Oh yeah, that game is kinda like Outer Wilds." These moments are to be celebrated, remembered, and honestly given more than a very positive rating. This month's shiny new game is one such example, a game which takes its inspiration from a place that seems well trod, but with an approach that is as novel as it is absurdly fun. Technically speaking, this is a job simulator, a game about work, a genre which for some reason is very appealing to those looking to relax after work. But unless I'm wrong, and I'm never wrong, tell me if I'm wrong in the comments, it's cool, you haven't played a work simulation game like this, because no workplace simulator I know of takes itself this seriously in such an unserious game. Welcome to Uncle Chop's Rocket Shop, new devotee. Sign here. Okay, confused yet? Get used to that, it's a central game mechanic. A few reviewers have referred to this game as Souls-like, and I might be on board with that. Challenges in Uncle Chop do remind me of getting my face and foot reacquainted by a new boss. But for now, let's meet Wilbur. That's you, you're Wilbur, a man with a four-eyed fox head and the new mechanic for the Little Mesa branch of Uncle Chop's spaceship repair service. I do not know if Wilbur is an alien or a mutant or a hybrid. We see a lot of unique species on the station, but nothing else like Wilbur. Or like Druce, for that matter. Druce is the owner and operator of the adjoining cafe, who orients you to your new home. Druce is the best. We love Druce on this channel, seriously one of the most positive and supportive NPCs I've ever known, despite everything we're going to find out about him. The last central character is Uncle Chop himself. This is your boss, and kind of your landlord since he expects rent payments every 3 days as payment for employing you. Yet you're not supposed to like Uncle Chop. But whatever, we've got a job, so let's get to it. Here's our first customer, so go. Fix the thing. You don't know how to do that. Well, of course you don't. You've never repaired a starship before. You don't know what goes into it. The only experience you have is Druce's tutorial section where he teaches you how to refuel your house. Starting off, you're very in the dark. But fortunately, your predecessor left you something extraordinarily valuable. Just gotta pry his fingers off and there we go. This, kids, is the Grimoire. It holds everything you will need to know about repairing rocket ships. It's big, by the way, like over 100 pages of repair instructions, artwork, notes from Phil, the dead guy you launched into space, and the occasional occult symbol. By the way, the setting of Uncle Chop's. How do I describe this? We're on a very organic-looking artificial world, very alien in appearance. It's kind of a mess, and one with a vibe to it that I'm gonna call comically sinister. All over the place, you have these upside-down crosses, weird markings, and the number 14 recurring in suspicious ways. That, and some of the creepy things said by the customers, gives a sense that the calm surface of Little Mesa runs a whole lot deeper than it lets on. But back to the Grimoire. You are faced with a problem. The oil is broken. It's your job to fix it, but you don't know how. But you do have the Grimoire. So time to crack that thing open. Well, now that's certainly a diagram. See, here's the thing. The Grimoire doesn't know what problems you'll face. Instead, much like a real-world manual, it has information on everything. This diagram is an overview. This page is for fluid adjustment. This one is for heatsink replacement. This one is about the wiring. Here's info on the pancake. Future technology is very pancake-driven. There's an adage you should embrace. Good mechanics read the manual. Wilbur's workday is only 8 minutes long, but until you clock in, you have all the time in the world, so you can use that time to study if you choose, better preparing you for what you'll encounter. But I did not do this, and let's be honest, neither will you. So I page back and forth between the oil module itself and its requisite pages before finally determining that, surprise surprise, it's way too full. It needs to be half full. A little exploration finds canisters in Meatball's shop, so I buy one, attach the canister to the output, turn on the pump, and drink. Houston, we have a problem. So, why did the canister explode? Always vent excess heat before attaching a canister. Sure enough, the thermometer is heavily in the red and the attached heatsink is damaged. Back to Meatball for a new heatsink and a new canister. Heatsink is in place. Why isn't it going down? Okay, you have to hold a button. There we go. Alright, oil is cooled, heatsink replaced, oil is at the correct level, we're good. Except now the customer is grumpy because A, it took too long, and B, we forgot to screw the cover back on. No tip. This is how every run of Uncle Chop's rocket shop will go. A ship will land, you'll get a list of fixes, you will consult the grimoire, buy supplies, and conduct repairs. You get paid for each repair and get a tip if you do it quickly. Mistakes are costly though, so good work is incentivized. Time is a key gameplay element. You have 8 minutes to do as many jobs as you can, and you have a target sum to reach for rent. Any extra money should be used to buy upgrades so you can take on higher paying jobs. Or cigarettes. Don't smoke, kids. I should mention here that Chops has 2 ways to play. Frantic Fixing has you complete as many jobs as you can on a timer, choosing jobs based on whether you think you can finish them or not. Focused Fixing limits you to 3 jobs a day. The jobs are harder, but you don't have a time limit, and the customer's tips will be based on the quality of your work rather than your speed. Frantic Fixing was the mode I picked because it seemed to be the intended gameplay experience. That said, this game is available on all major consoles, and I simply don't see how Frantic Fixing is doable with a controller. So if you're not on PC, Focused Fixing might be the way to go. But whichever way you go, you need to make that money, because if you can't pay your rent, you get fired. By this. Oh, this is scenic. So yeah, we died. Because this isn't just a job simulator, this is a roguelike job simulator. Yeah, add that one to the bingo card. So when you reach a failure state, in this case death, you start from scratch. Well, there are some permanent upgrades, but aside from the electric tools, which I recommend getting first, their impact isn't that notable. Fortunately for Wilbur, he's got a friend on the other side. It turns out that Druce is not just the local cafe owner, he's also the arachnoid god of Limbo, the being who shepherds souls to their afterlives. And since the two of you are buds, he's willing to keep looping you back in time until you get it right. Which is where the real novelty of this game comes into play. Let's say your next job is another oil module. This time, you see right away that the heat is maxed out, so even before opening it, you know you're going to need a new heatsink, and that you can't put a canister on it while it's hot. You might still check the grimoire out of an abundance of caution, but at the very least you know something about how oil modules work and how to fix them. So this round should go a lot faster and with less property damage. You might notice that Uncle Chop uses very limited abstraction in its mechanics. Most things have to be done manually through clicking and dragging. It's very tactile and adequately expresses the feel of working with complicated machines. There isn't any automation to these processes. Nothing you can just press a button on and let it do its own work. Every step from opening the module to collecting your tips has to be done by the player. Uncle Chop's rocket shop does not compromise. This is, after all, your job. And sometimes that job is more dangerous than it should be. Getting blown up is rough, especially if you blew up because you didn't understand the manual on defusing pipe bombs. Why did Phil have this? It also reminded me of another game that uses modules and explosives. This is Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, and whether I have my own footage or trailer footage will largely depend on whether I found anyone to play around with me. This classic multiplayer game hands a module-littered bomb to one player and a manual to another. The player with the manual has to guide the player with the bomb to either success or death, depending on how the last game of Overcooked went. An argument could be made that Uncle Chop's is a single-player version of Keep Talking, but that leaves out some key context. See, Keep Talking is supposed to keep you guessing. Neither player should know what's coming. Getting good at Keep Talking means improving communication and your speed at reading the manual. Meanwhile, Uncle Chop expects that at some point you will throw the manual in the bin. Approaching a module for the first time is intimidating. Some have complicated steps, some are dependent on other modules, and some change the mode of play entirely. It's very common to take way too long and make mistakes on your first try, but like the oil module, each subsequent encounter will increase your skill. It's also unique from other job simulators. Instead of taking an existing job and translating the experience into a game, Uncle Chops creates a trade from whole cloth. This job does not exist in the real world, and so you won't be bringing pre-existing skills or knowledge into the game with you. Instead, you will learn on the job, through trial and error, through success, and sometimes frustrating failure. Some modules will kill you if you screw them up, and these deaths can feel unfair, particularly when you have no familiarity and a short time to avert disaster. Like, seriously, how was I supposed to survive this guy? He just shows up and kills you with no warning. Okay, that one's on me. Pro tip: whenever you struggle or fail at a new module, especially if it triggers a visit to the great beyond, open the grimoire. Understanding the instructions on first approach is hard, but once you've handled the module, it gets easier to assimilate the technical information as usable knowledge. Over time, you'll learn what supplies you should keep on hand. You'll learn which modules can be done the fastest and which need to be prioritized. You'll be able to look at an incoming job and instinctively formulate a plan on how to handle it. You will, in short, become a professional. At a job that doesn't really exist, but still, I don't know of another game which has done this, just created a previously non-existent trade and simulated the experience of learning it. There are real-world skills you can learn from this game, like initiative. Don't avoid new tasks for fear of failure, because only practice leads to competency. Or time management. There's only so much that can be done in one day. If you have to buy supplies and bake pancakes, do it for multiple modules at once. How about preparation? The more ready you are, the more capable you'll be. Carry commonly used supplies on your person and use your storage to hold complicated setups to speed things along. Or what about work-life balance? Well, what about it? Okay, how do I say this? Uncle Chop's Rocket Shop is kind of a struggle. There are boss battles at regular intervals, and they are annoyingly hard. Further, as you get into the later game, there are so many modules on each job that you can kiss tips goodbye. And I found that as I threw myself against it, I was using up a lot of time. A single run of Uncle Chop can last an hour and a half or more, and when you die because you screwed up a job or took the wrong customer and get sent back, well, this might actually be the perfect job simulator. Because despite starting my career in rocket repair with excitement, I got burned out. I had 30 hours in and had yet to even reach the end once, let alone clear a run. When I was told to go back to start, I realized I was exhausted. Part of it is that no matter how well you play, each shift still lasts for 8 minutes. In other roguelikes, as you improve in skill, you clear each stage faster, letting you retry the higher echelons sooner. Not so in Uncle Chop. Speed in the early game doesn't mean faster progress, it means more money for later levels. And I was becoming painfully afraid that I would never be good enough to reach the end. So I made a decision. I switched to focused fixing. With only 3 jobs to do and the time pressure gone, I was confident I could get myself to the end of the game and at least be able to talk about it to that point. And it did kind of work. Using focused fixing, I was able to climb the levels, never fearful of failure since I had more than enough time to read the grimoire as I went. I did fail one test, but since I had a lot of money, Chop passed me anyway. This might be a different kind of simulator. And with focused fixing, I made it to the final boss, and died. What happened? I made a mistake and was uncertain how to correct it, even with the grimoire, and so I got sent back. That made me reflect. Focused fixing gives you infinite time. It also gives you more difficult jobs. So even though the chance of failure was heavily reduced, the time to complete each job was compounded. That focused fixing run took me almost 4 hours, which absolutely blew my mind. Not only that, but I didn't find it fun anymore. Without the time pressure, the learning aspect faded away and was replaced with a step-by-step instruction simulator. Not only that, but the difficulty actually worked against my intentions. See, there's only so many things that can be wrong with each module, so when you turn the difficulty up, you remove the diagnosis part of the process. I don't have to figure out what's wrong with the oil anymore because I already know that everything will be wrong with it. That takes away both the tension of finding a job harder than expected and the almost comical relief at realizing the only needed fix was a button press. Focused fixing took all that away, and to add injury to insult, it took up way more of my time. It made me sit back. I was burned out on frantic fixing. Focused fixing made the problem worse, but I really wanted to do a video on this game because just look at it. This is so good, so cool, so innovative, but I couldn't bring myself to play one more run. Yeah, so for now, enjoy the spoiler section. Go here if you want to avoid spoilers for the story, but I can't guarantee what comes after will be positive. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go learn about fishing. This station and the game itself is definitely more than it seems. This is not, and I repeat not, just a rocket repair simulator. But if you're going to uncover the truth of things, you'll need to look for patterns. While the aliens who patronize your establishment are of a healthy variety, you'll soon notice some commonalities. For example, these fellows are all on the shorter side, wear golden masks, and have a preoccupation with wealth. They are the Empyrean, servants of a being known as the Golden One. In another fandom, they might be called the Ferengi. Their preoccupation with wealth extends to their religion, as they seem to have found or built a place they refer to as heaven, to which only the wealthiest may aspire. On the other end of the spectrum are the cultists, known for wearing tall hats with eldritch symbols on them. They serve the hungering dark. All matter is profane in their eyes, and they long for the day when their god will consume the whole of the universe. Though you might not be eaten if you screw up their fuel pump. You'll have to be the one to decide if you're insulted by that or not. At first, I thought these were just flavor text, fun little groups to catch your imagination. In reality, these are alternative career paths. On day 4, you'll find an alien in a large helmet crying in Druce's basement because his fledgling subscription will expire if he doesn't sell more subscriptions. Take him up on his offer and you join the Magpies, a cross between interstellar explorers and pyramid scheme. They'll set you up with a sales booth you can operate between or instead of repairs. It doesn't make much money, but the goal isn't so much the profit, but to rank up your subscription. Profit will come further down the line. Surely. The Magpies are the easiest group to get in with. The rest require some thinking or some luck. For example, to get in with the Empyrean, you either need to be lucky enough to obtain a rare item before it's needed, repair a broken version of it using a magic storage shelf, or bring a working one back in time. And I still haven't figured out how to get in with the Hive, a cluster of diverse aliens who spend all their time in virtual reality. But I think it might have something to do with these bits of notation that appear when the grimoire is under a black light, or this symbol I found in the VR warehouse. And I'm thinking these are going to be necessary because Porkchop, the guy who owns and runs this shop, he's a bad dude. Okay, that's not a surprise. Any boss who kills you because you didn't make enough money isn't getting this mug. But it goes deeper than that. Remember the number 14? Well, at one point Druce mentions that there are 13 gods in the universe, 4 of which are living on Little Mesa. There's a basement area under the workshop which has the number 13 scribbled all over it, with no more written above, and a suggestion for where an additional one could go. It seems that Porkchop isn't just interested in being a normal corporate CEO, he has aspirations for divinity. A theory which is confirmed when you reach the final boss, a massive machine with all new modules. Its purpose is to use a combination of science and sorcery to ascend Porkchop to godhood. It's a process that involves hormones, human-ish sacrifice, and lo-fi beats to ascend to. Porkchop starts this phrase by dumping some hitherto uncertain exposition. He explains that the entire universe is governed by a handful of gods, beings who did nothing to earn their power. He calls attention to you and his achievements on Little Mesa and vows that he will be the god who fights for the everyman, for the little guy. And if you believe that, well, I have a list of hot singles in your area just waiting to meet you. Because Porkchop has only done one thing during our whole career, take our money. So making him a god? Really bad idea. Unfortunately, at this point in the game, I had no idea what else to do and knew he would kill me if I refused. And I'd become kind of desperate to get through at least one run. The Ascension machine is actually a really fun job, by the way, with a ton of moving parts, instructions clearly kludged together by Chop, and a wide variety of tools and actions to take. This also makes locking those last few steps into place nerve-wracking, since one thing out of place will result in failure and another death. But once you do, yeah, that ain't good. And so you wake up in limbo again, where Druce reveals the truth. So Druce. Druce is more than just your average NPC. He's awesome, just the most supportive guy. You know how time loops are increasingly illustrating how hellish it would be? Well, Druce makes a strong case for how mutual support could help you overcome adversity. While Druce is the architect of the loop, this means he has to endure it with you, which he does gladly because he needs and believes in you. It's actually kind of funny, Wilbur doesn't ever speak, and Druce confirms he has some kind of dark past, but that never changes Druce's attitude. He commits to being at Wilbur's side. Mostly. Your first death is from a very amateur assassin who, as it turns out, was sent by Druce to kill you so the looping could start. He does apologize. He also killed the previous repairman, Phil, with a knife to the back. Seems cold, but consider that Druce is very uncomfortable around dead bodies, so making one was probably a hard thing to do. And he did it so that he could get you on the station, by the way. Additionally, Druce tries to take responsibility for his actions. Yes, he killed you, but he zooped you right back. Given how Porkchop runs things, you would have died in 3 days anyways, because only the time loop has allowed you to learn how to do your job at all. As far as Phil goes, well, Druce is the Shepherd of Souls, so even though Phil was kind of an asshole, Druce canonically brought him to a very happy and pleasant afterlife. Way better than his mortal life warranted. It's interesting to contrast Porkchop's view on gods with our own experience with one. Porkchop sees the gods as spoiled oppressors, something he longs to be. But Druce spends the majority of his time as a humble cafe owner. He stays here because he finds Little Mesa's scenery beautiful, and he is constantly supportive of Wilbur, encouraging his events, offering breakfast and dinner, or just chilling with him the night before his final confrontation with Chop. Druce is a helper, a kind and, despite his fearsome appearance, merciful god. And the reason he's putting Wilbur through this is because he knows what the future will be like if Porkchop becomes the 14th god, so how is Wilbur supposed to stop this apocalyptic event from unfolding? Well, I don't know, and neither does Druce, actually. I have theories, and I strongly suspect the faction side jobs are part of it, but for the moment, nope, no clue. But you know what? This story is getting interesting, and if it keeps on that way, there might be another Uncle Chop video in the future. And with that, let's step out of spoiler territory.
Snails retracting into their shells when you give them a prod. Do it enough times, and they'll gradually stop reacting.
Huh. Well, that sheds some light on the issue. So, this became a job. Not just a game about a job, but a job. I'm doing a video on this, and I need to have a good grasp of the game before I can honestly recommend it, which means the 30 hours I'd played was just about every waking, non-working hour from Friday to Monday. And by the way, there's a lot of recording to sort through. And that, as Adam Millard's video about fishing minigames posits, had exhausted me. So I did what anybody who's tired of their job does. I took a vacation. Well, okay, just a break. I watched some anime, I went skiing, made spaghetti, and also decided to break with tradition and watch a couple videos about this game. Nothing spoilery, just a couple streams and one of those 5 things I wish I knew videos. For as good as it is, there's not enough discourse on this game. Again. I didn't use most of the tips, but I did find it interesting that most players I watched were focus fixing. I'll have to view more to see if that's a trend, but it did speak volumes for how intimidating the frantic fixing can be. Having played both, I really don't think it's a hard mode. It's less forgiving, yes, but it's also more malleable. And I used that aspect to get what I was after. My secret? Start playing the game by my own rules. And here's how that went. Fresh off my break, having survived skiing, I went into day 1. Now this strategy was refined over 3 runs, and I'm condensing it, just in case you thought I'd somehow figured it out first try. You can't do much about day 1. You only have $20 to work with, and any upgrades you order won't come until the next day. Day 1 is kind of a waste, so I skip it. I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner. I said earlier that each day is 8 minutes long, but just because you have time on the clock doesn't mean you have to use it. After one fix, you can punch out, and you're done. So typically I'll pick a fast job, usually unfluffing the shower, and then I'll use my rerolls looking for generous customers. If I find one, I'll do the job. If not, bedtime. But before bed, I go massively into debt. I buy the encoder, the workshop, and the chunky upgrade. That last one reduces your job options to 1 with no rerolls, but it doubles all payouts. Also, if I got a visit from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Lovecraftian Horror, I might buy the money tree as well, which adds 20% to all invoices and fees. There's a risk-reward balance to this I never indulged in before. If you screw up, you could ruin your run, but screw-ups were getting a lot rarer for me. Usually I can work myself back out of debt and maybe even cover my rent on this second day. If I do, I'll also buy the sidecar and the pancake maker. Sidecar adds an additional job choice to the board. It overrides Chunky's effect, letting you pick from 2 different jobs. Because 2 options is always going to be better than 1. I ignore the upgrades that focus on customers unless I'm really flush with cash, because by mid-game, jobs take so long that no one is going to tip me. Day 3 starts with one of 2 jobs, the security alarm or the pipe bomb. I want the pipe bomb. It's potentially fatal, but with Chunky and Money Tree it can pay out triple the first rent, meaning I can skip the rest of the day, pay Chop, and go to bed. There are also 2 things I eliminate from my to-do list. The first is the identification module. Calibrating focus is time-consuming since photos take 15 seconds to develop and the system for calibration is kind of unreliable, so while I fix everything else perfectly, I shift the focus 3 notches in a random direction and just let it ride. I'll take a fee, but it will be outweighed by the rest of my repairs, and you'd be surprised how often that random guess is correct. The other is the AI's mood. This thing is weird and hard to learn. I did finally figure it out, but I still have to load up cartridges with XP and follow the algorithm, and it's just kind of a mess, okay? Unless the target emotion is bored, which just means I have to screw it up. I can do that. Again, there's a fee, but again, it gets outweighed by the rest of the repairs. Another rule I learned is danger is good, because while potentially fatal jobs can destroy your run, they're also quick, so don't be afraid to put your life on the line to save a few minutes. Another rule is poop is good, for similar reasons. Now to go much further would spoil the rest of the game, but I will say 2 things. You want to have as much money as possible when you take the final job, but you can probably make enough money in the last 2 or 3 days beforehand. So if you do have enough rent, maybe call it a day. Doing this, I cut the time of my runs down dramatically while simultaneously getting myself back into the more interesting parts of the game. Uncle Chops does have a mechanic where experienced players can proceed faster. I was just so fixated on being a good employee I never thought to use it. And if you were wondering, I did in fact manage to beat the final job. But roguelikes are gonna rogue, and so finishing the game is not the end. And so there might be a call to revisit this game later, when I have some time. Because you know what? It's fun again. Thanks for playing, you guys.